What is going on, guys? This is Skyhound, also known as Geek Archivist Xavier Pierce, and welcome to a very special anniversary episode. While this would be considered episode 4 of the Otaku Center, the reason why this is a special anniversary episode is because this is the 20th anniversary of the spin-off anime Mahou Shoujo Lyrical Nanoha. Now, in case you're wondering as to how that is the case, well, this, ladies and gentlemen, is the movie summarized version of season 1, but it's more of an alternate telling of the events of the first season. Not only that, but I also happen to have this. Again, the alternate telling of season 2, and this one was actually, if memory serves me right, this was back around the mid 2010s, whereas with this one for season 1 of Mahou Shoujo Lyrical Nanoha was around 2004. And the thing was that the whole magical girl niche, there is a YouTube video that I did come across some years ago, but for the purpose of this video, I'm strictly going to be going over the first entry. But before I forget, this does have to do with a Japanese erotic visual novel game that is known as Triangle Heart. Now, Nanoha Takamachi, from what I understand, is actually a side character, but eventually they managed to take some elements of the game and make it a spin-off series. Eventually, that became what made it popular at 2004. So bear with me for a bit. Okay, so as you can see here on the Wikipedia article for the title of that eroge game series that I told you about, it's abbreviated as Toraha, and it's a series of eroge video games by Janus and OVAs by Mook and 7 Arcs. As it says here, that it is best known for its spin-off series Mahou Shoujo Lyrical Nanoha, or Magical Girl Lyrical Nanoha. And here's the explanation for the whole triangle heart. The name comes from the fact that each game focuses on a triangle of one boy, 2 girls. Now here's one thing that's a little bit interesting here. I did find a what looks like a blog regarding the Lyrical Nanoha and how it started back then. But these two characters right here, this one is referred to as usually the main character, and then this one's like one of the quote-unquote love interests. But in the case of Nanoha, this one was referred to as like the big brother and big sister in the anime. Just for clarification. As you can see here, Triangle Heart first started in December 18 of 1998. The last one was in June 29, 2001. That's actually 3 years before the whole magical girl genre started kicking off. Now, with regards to that, let's get to the next point of what I'm trying to explain here. So this is what I found as I was trying to prep for doing this recording. Quick shout out to the author Andrea Ritsu, who wrote this blog / article regarding Lyrical Retrospective. As you can see here, this is regarding Triangle Heart and Lyrical Toy Box. So they do give a reference to Vivid Strike with regards to the Nanoha universe. As you can see here, we see the design for Nanoha Takamachi, and obviously there's her name in Japanese. So, oh, sorry, I apologize if I'm going a little too fast here. But the author states that in the game, the young Nanoha was voiced um, or by the voice actor Hitomi, at the time credited as Hokuto Minami, who would continue to portray Nanoha for all pieces of media, and she didn't play a major part in the game, mainly serving as the younger sister of the Takamachi family. Now, as I mentioned a while ago, that the ones I mentioned earlier, to go back here, older brother, older sister for Nanoha, but there is a little something here that's a little interesting going back here to the blog. So design wise, it's obviously, the same characters that we see in the Nanoha series. One clue here is that the name of the baking company, Midoriya, they kept that part in the anime. And then this part right here, you can see that eventually they took this, and then when they did the spin-off, instead of a cat, we get the ferret that is referred to as Yuno. Okay, so before I go any further with regards to doing the comparison between the anime version and the film, I want to go over how it started with me in terms of how I came across this. Back in the early 2000s, I remembered I was part of a message board that was for fans of the magical girl anime Magic Knight Rayearth. That was done by Clamp back in the mid 90s, early to mid 90s. And one of the users had a particular signature, and it showed a certain banner, and it showed those two girls from Mahou Shoujo Lyrical Nanoha. However, I didn't know about it at the time till my best friend brought it up to me. Give me one moment. I'm just trying to find the exact picture here. Give me 1 second. Ah, I got it. Give me 1 second. I'll show it to you guys in a bit. Okay, so this is the signature that I remember coming across for one user. I don't remember who it was. So I asked my best friend about it, and then, eventually he told me about it. And one time when he was visiting, I was given a blank, okay, not blank, a written DVD-R. It was white, and it contained the 13 episodes. It was, from what I recall, it was fan subbed of this anime. Okay, so now as you can see here, I'm actually on the fandom wiki for this particular anime. Here you see the rough summary done by fans in terms of what the first official season is about. Here's a little something that fans point out, when it comes to not just whether it's the manga or the sound stages as they're referred to. You can see here it states that the story for Mahou Shoujo Lyrical Nanoha is set in the first half of 0065 according to the Mid-Childen calendar. Now, as I mentioned a while ago with regards to Midoriya, which was taken straight from that eroge visual novel series Triangle Heart, they run a coffee shop. So they kept certain elements of that and put it into this spin-off. As you can see here, there's 13 episodes. I'm kind of like going through each one, and it shows the airing date of each episode, with the 13th episode being the last one. Now, what I want to point out here is that, according to the Wikipedia, when they were being told about this, they obviously didn't know about these characters, Christina V and the others who were working on it. But one thing I want to point out here, I want to give a quick comparison. You see here that, take for example, episode 2, when Nanoha actually manages to defeat her first monster and becomes a magical girl. You see the Japanese title, it's the exact same as it was shown on the show originally. Mahou no Jumo no Lyrical Nano. And we see here the actual translation is Lyrical is the magical word. Sorry, I'm tripping here. But on the dubbed version, it's a little different. So give me a moment. Let me try to find it. And then, we'll go from there. So as you can see here, this one was taken straight from the dubbed version. But from what I can gather here is that this is their translation of it. It's pretty much the same. They just wanted to try to make it look grammatically correct. Now, when it comes to going from one language to another, unfortunately, I'll put it this way. For those in other countries, when you're trying to translate from Japanese and then they also have a bit of English in there, and you're trying to put it into your own native language, English isn't that straightforward as far as I can tell. But I will say this, that for those who are able to understand, going from one language and then putting it into their own native language, I can argue that they sometimes have it easier than Americans or those that are learning English. So as you can see here, it shows that it's shown as my magical incantation is lyrical. So you got that, then you got the one that I showed you guys a while ago. Okay, so before I go any further with regards to some fundamental differences between movie format versus the TV show format, I do want to point out that there is definite differences in terms of how this story was being retold. Number one, you have to factor in the sound stages. Now, the thing with these audio recordings, if you will, by the same cast members who are in the anime, these can sometimes act in as filler episodes in between the actual episode of the anime itself. Because it falls within the timeline, it does sometimes provide some additional context to whatever events or whatever stories is being told from the perspective of said characters. Now, in the case of Nanoha here, on the movie version, it does mention as it. I'm just reading a little bit from the fandom wiki, but I have recalled bits of it. Is that the character known as Lyneth? If you want to know who that is, it's this one right here. This one right here, ladies and gentlemen. This character was not in the original timeline. Hence, you have the alternate universe. So, as was summarized on the fan wiki, that Lyneth only appeared in Nanoha Soundstage number 2. Also, on top of that, besides how Precia Testarossa was conveyed, there's a difference between the original continuity versus what you see in the film. And before I forget, the appearances of the devices Raising Hato, which belongs to Nanoha, and Bardish, which belongs to Fate. They both have different shapes. On top of that, there are additional forms that Raising Heart doesn't have in the original continuity, hence the alternate universe. So, in this sense, this is literally coming from, both Nanoha and Fate, because they're already older, and they're explaining this to their fellow forwards who were under their specific, tutelage. This is regarding strikers to an extent, but they are listening to how those two remember it. Now, before I go on any further with regards to the main plot of season 1, I need to tell you guys that when it comes to certain topics that are actually dark in nature, the movie version doesn't tell that. Fate herself knows this. Arf, her familiar, knows this. Nanoha knows what really went on. Which is why in the movie version, Nanoha and Fate are just consultants. So what Signum is telling to the forwards versus what Nanoha and Fate are telling them, you can tell right now as I'm saying this, it contradicts each other to an extent. Because there's an episode in Strikers where Tiana actually disobeys Nanoha, and Nanoha actually knows that Tiana was actually not paying attention during the lessons, and Nanoha's an instructor. So she's like, all this time, I was trying to teach you guys something, and then you're doing something behind my back. I mean, I'm just kind of paraphrasing here, but she was like, is what I've been teaching you guys, useless? And so Nanoha actually punishes Tiana in her way. And she also, binds Subaru as well. And she's telling her, since you're also an accomplice in this, you have to watch, Tiana getting punished. And Subaru is definitely annoyed at first and angry. So when Tiana kind of goes off on a sort of self-pity rant, Signum, being the cool-headed leader of the Vulcanator, she really grills Tiana in stating that move you were doing, what were you trying to prove? Who was it really for? It's like, do you have any regard for your own life? And unfortunately, one of the subordinates named Shari, who also wears glasses, she overhears the whole thing, and then we get the rough summary of the jewel seat incident, and Signum and Shari are the ones who are narrating it to the forwards Subaru, Tiana, Chiaro, and Erio. Now, Chiaro and Erio, those two are being adopted by Fate, her being the so-called guardian of those two. Whereas Tiana and Subaru are under Nanoha's tutelage. Now, what is really interesting, I'm going to kind of go straight into Strikers a little bit because I'm just kind of giving some context. When they show the actual fight between Fate and Nanoha, and then Nanoha uses her Starlight Breaker on Fate, Erio is very surprised at, you know, how a 9-year-old girl who has no magical capabilities is able to pull off something like that. Now, if you really want me to actually, show you the clip, I'm more than happy to kind of give a little bit of context. So bear with me for a few minutes as I look it up.
昔ね、一人の女の子がいたの。その子は本当に普通の女の子で、魔法なんて知りもしなかったし、戦いなんてするような子じゃなかった。友達と一緒に学校へ行って、家族と一緒に幸せに暮らして、そういう一生を送るはずの子だった。だけど、事件が起こったの。魔法学校に通っていたわけでもなければ、特別なスキルがあったわけでもない。偶然の出会いで魔法を得て、たまたま魔力が大きかったってだけのたった9歳の女の子が、魔法と出会ってからわずか数ヶ月で命がけの実践を繰り返したの。これフェイトさん。フェイトちゃんは当時家族環境が複雑でね、あるロストロギアをめぐって敵同士だったんだって。
この事件の中心人物はテスタロッサの母、その名を取ってプレシア・テスタロッサ事件、あるいはジュエルシード事件と呼ばれている。
収束法、こんな大きな。
9歳の女の子がただでさえ大威力砲撃は体にひどい負担がかかるのに。
その後もな、さほど時も置かず戦いは続いた。
Okay, so that clip that was shown from episode 9 of Strikers was just giving a rough summary of the Jewel Seed incident. Now notice on that clip, it's Shari, Shamar, and Signum. They're narrating the events of what happened to the forwards. And then you see the reaction of how Nanoha, a 9-year-old girl, 0 magic abilities from Earth, just like Hayate, they're superior. They're both from the same planet. She comes across magic through a chance at fate. Not referring to the girl here, but you see where I'm getting at. Now let's take a look at the comparison of the fight sequence that was shown briefly in that episode. So after seeing that fight sequence, you can see how it's just a rehash of what happened as shown in episode 9 of Strikers. With those details out of the way, let's see the alternate universe comparison, which is straight from the eyes of Nanoha and Fate themselves, as they are retelling the exact event from their perspective.
Phalanx.
打ち砕け。
Can you move, Master?
いけるよ。レイジングハート。
Cannon mode.
バインド。いつ。ディバインバスター。あの子だってもう限界なはず。これを耐えきれば。
Starlight Breaker.
使い切れずにばらまいちゃった魔力をもう一度自分のところに集める。収束砲撃。レイジングハートと考えた知恵と戦術、最後の切り札。受けてみて。これが私の全力全開。スターライトブレイカー。
So now that we've seen both versions of the exact same fight from two different perspectives, what did we notice? One, you have the appearance of both characters. Number two, there's a few minor differences with regards to, one would say, how would I put this? Oh yeah, the way how Fate is using phalanx shift, one of her attacks. The difference being is that in the movie version, she doesn't invoke the names mentioned in the original timeline. So I did a little bit of digging around on some of the names. Not all of them, but you can tell that some of them are, to an extent, European in nature. One would say either it could be Latin or it might be Greek, but there are a few. I did some digging around, and it might be correct, it might not be, but what I can tell is that this was just used in terms of the spell itself. So bear with me for a few minutes as I go digging up that information. Okay, so again, I made some notes with regards to the names that were invoked. So when I was reading the subtitles, from my observation, they look like fan subs instead of the actual one, because when this was airing and there were people who were trying to do subs for those who spoke English, that some of this stuff, even when it came to other languages, when Fate was bringing out those names when she was about to use her phalanx shift attack, some of these ones, I'm willing to bet that they kept those names in the fan subs regardless of whatever language you speak, because that is how not just the character is portrayed, but also if you go and look those up, you're either not going to find it or they were just playing this by ear, which is arguably 90% of the time when it comes to subs, even those learning languages, myself included. Now, look here, I'm just referencing this from Procorala, excuse me. So we see here that one of the names supposedly is Zael. I know I'm probably going to get that incorrect. It happens. But when I was reading the subs, according to my notes, it was spelled Zaluel. Now, one of the key things when it comes to the Japanese and their pronunciation of letters, and I was doing a little bit of digging from watching a certain actor explain that the R's and the L's, and I've seen this not just in Japanese tokusatsu shows, but even in anime, their R's and L's, they really sound very similar if you're listening very carefully. Now, in this case, it's pronounced, I'm guessing, Zaid. The L is more of like an RU, so you get that rough L sound. But as you can see here, the origin is Greek. Gender is very specific, it's referring to female. And here we have the meaning, one who has the strength of the sea. So my understanding of this is Fate is invoking a name of someone that has not just the strength of the sea, but you can also kind of allude it to storms or a tempest, if you will. Now, here's another one that I found. According to the subs, they refer to it as Aegis. So one thing I can tell is that it's in reference, again, Greek in nature. So here's what I found based on what my findings were. Quoting here from World Atlas, which is where I found it, I was digging around. It's asking the question, who is the Aegean Sea named after? And then you have the explanation. It's an elongated portion of the Mediterranean Sea, roughly 380 miles long, with a surface area of 82,600 square miles. And the islets adorn the Aegean Sea. So here we get the reference as to, again, where that name comes from, if you're curious about it. The third one, I'm guessing around here, again, as I was trying to poke around. So here on, before I get to the third one, Aegean Sea, it's in reference, it's in Greek, there's your origin right there. It simply means the wavy coast. Traditionally, the sea was known as the archipelago, which in English meant the chief sea. So a little bit of language and history lesson for you right there. Now here's the third one that I managed to find as I was looking around. The third one, Arcus, that was the first name that was invoked by Fate when she was about to use that spell. So here we can sort of see the origin is in England. Then we have a bit of the early origins. It was first found in Berwickshire. And then we have here the coat of arms. And then roughly the early history, according to the webpage by House of Names, that we have the early history. It shows the years. Here's the Arcus spelling variations. We have the surname. This is one. We have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, approximately. But it said there's many more. So we see here, here's the one that we're looking for. This is one of the variations. And then here's one example. Arcus settlers in New Zealand around the 19th century. Here's a reference to one of the people with that name. It is a last name that's shown here. So we get roughly, again, the idea of like where they're pulling this from. That most of these names, and I'll read it out again, the whole list of names: Arcus, Cotus, Aegeus, Bardel, Zardel, Browzel. These are names that one would say you hear mostly from the West, specifically either in Greece, England, or it could be either Latin in origin. Again, I'm not actually, a certified linguist. Thankfully, my best friend, who has a master's degree and is a linguist in and of himself, because that's what he's into, knows this stuff. So again, I'm just referencing these sites. I will be putting it in the works site below because I'm using the MLA format. You get an idea of where these names come from. Now, if you notice, again, with the movie version of, the exact same events, since it's in the alternate universe, Fate doesn't actually invoke these names, whereas in the original timeline, she does. But as you can see, it's kind of like, a bombardment assault. And Nanoha, being a mid-range type of, attacker, and also considering she's from Earth, she's like, okay, I know she's about to try to pull off something here. So while she's prepping, I might as well use this time gap, if you will, to make a counter of my own. And she's very clever here. But what I like with the movie version is that as Fate is preparing her attack, Nanoha's thinking several steps ahead. She's like, it's not going to be able to go through me entirely, and she's going to wear herself out. In that time, I might as well use my own tricks to, answer with some attacks of my own, which is what you see in the alternate universe version. But now you see, you get a little bit of like a little language and history lesson from what I was able to find. So now that we got that little tidbit out of the way, let's get straight to the point regarding the main entry of this IP, if you will. So again, this is dealing with the jewel seed incident, and Nanoha Takamachi is a 9-year-old girl who lives on Earth with her family, and she comes across a chance meeting with Yuno, who is in ferret form. He explains to her the situation of, why he's here, why he's trying to find these lost logia, or dogia, if I'm going by, accent here, and these jewel seeds and what they are. And he gives Nanoha the rundown in terms of, his visit to Earth, if you will. Now they find out that Fate Testarossa is also looking for these jewel seeds. And as I explained with Strikers, they give a rough summary of the event, which then brings us to the antagonist Precia Testarossa. While Fate is not the actual daughter of Precia Testarossa, we see here that the girl in the container in episode 12, if you will, Precia Testarossa lets out the truth, and she finds out, Fate in this case, she finds out that she's just a clone of Alicia. And the funny thing with familiars is that the episode prior to the big fight between Nanoha and Fate is that Precia Testarossa points out that she let Fate have a little quote unquote too much freedom in making her own familiar, which is in this case is Arf. Now, one thing I want to point out here, I don't know if it's the result of the subs or if it's just, how they were trying to get the spelling correctly and all of that. I'm not sure in terms of details. But in the film version, they have it spelled ALPH. Now, the sound is the same. It's ARF because, as I said a while ago, the L and the R's are similar in sound. PH, you get that F sound. So while I get the sound part of it, I don't know if it's exactly the intention of the people who are doing the subs, because again, I have the DVD version of it. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'm not sure. But it's still the same person or character in this case. So when it comes to the point where Arf confronts Precia Testarossa, like she's really peeved at Precia Testarossa. She's pointing out to her all Fate wanted was to be loved, and she wanted your approval. And she's working herself to the bone to try and please you. And yet you still treat her that way. And when we see Precia Testarossa turn around and face Arf, she has that, sadistic, crazy look, similar to the villain in Strikers, Jail Scarietti. And I'm briefly referencing Strikers here because in the movie version, we find out that Precia Testarossa was, you could say, an associate or someone that Jair Scarietti knew. And in the series Strikers, we learn that Precia Testarossa, knew the guy. And that the whole thing about creating familiars and the like, considering she's a mage, she perfected that method. But at the same time, she was also so obsessed with trying to find a solution to supposedly trying to bring her daughter back. Where we learn about the actual objective is she's trying to find a place called Ad Hazado. Now, the Time Space Administration Bureau, or TSAB, explained to on Nanoha about this, and being a mage, an archaeological mage, FYI, he knows the tales about the place. And they try to bring Nanoha up to speed in terms of what it is and the rumors behind it. Now, what happens after is they're not entirely sure, and it's always left up in the air, about Precia Testarossa's fate. Either with the jewel seeds that she finds, or was, she took from Fate, whether or not she finds it, we'll never know. But what is clear is that she wanted to try to find the place to try and bring back her dead daughter. Now, Chrono and Captain Lindy, they're pointing out that they know the so-called rumors and everything else. There is no way to turn back time or bring back the dead. And, they make the firm argument that Precia Testarossa, despite what she went through, yes, she is crazy. Yes, she is a bit of a sociopath. And yes, she is a child abuser. Now, a key difference here is that notice when I was explaining about when Arf goes to confront Precia, that Fate doesn't bring it up in the movie version because she herself has gone through it. So basically, Precia Testarossa, as you can sort of see from that flashback on Strikers, you can look it up yourself if you want. She was cruel and she was desperate. So desperate, that's the reason why she worked Fate to the bone. She didn't give her any praise. And why you see that she just kept abusing her. That she keeps saying she's running out of time and you need to find the rest. And she gets so worn out in many ways that, again, when she drops the truth bomb on Fate, we see the reaction of everyone in attendance. She only saw her as a quote-unquote doll, like something to be used, a tool, if you will. If that's not sadistic enough, and if that's not the definition of child abuse, then I ask you, the viewer, what is? What is? Like I said, this definitely went a bit dark for a specific reason. Now, would I say it was successful in addressing that? Yes. Does it happen to kids? Absolutely. Regardless of either gender. You see where I'm getting at here? I'm not being misandrist. I'm not being misogynistic. I am stating the facts as they are. Such people exist. That's it. Now, with that rough summary out of the way in terms of both the film and alternate universe version, objectively, I'm giving this, at least from my observation, the original, I'm giving this at best a 8.5 out of 10. The movie version, I'm docking it down to at least a 7. The reason behind it all is that the main focus was on Fate and her circumstances. Nanoha tries to befriend her, and she's eventually successful. So, overall, I would say that the first one, from a subjective standpoint, on both the anime and the film version, I'm giving this, both of them, a 9 out of 10, subjectively, because it built a strong case in terms of characters that are misunderstood and done well. Now, on the movie version, I will say that while I understand the differences, others will not always agree. And that's perfectly fine. But I do know in terms of what we do agree on, from an objective standpoint. Subjectively, we may or may not disagree, we may not agree, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But overall, it does set a good foundation, starting point, if you will. Now, in terms of music, Yukari Tamura, I know she does not just the voice of Nanoha, but also does the singing part of it. Just like Nana Mizuki-san does both. Side note, I've probably stated it so many times, but those that are fans of Naruto, they know her. Those who watch the Precure franchise know her. Those who watch the anime Symphogear know her. You get the picture. But besides that, there is one other anime I will bring up regarding Yukari Tamura. She does the opening, or at least assists with the opening for Love After World Domination, which I will eventually cover. But overall, now you guys get the idea in terms of the origins of Nanoha, why it became popular, and you get my perspective in terms of how I got into it and all of that. Hope you guys enjoyed this in-depth, to an extent, analysis and summary of Mahou Shoujo Lyrical Nanoha. I also want to give a quick shout out to the voice actors both in Japan as well as here in the States. One in particular, Christina V. Quick shout out to her, who did Nanoha for the dub version in terms of both the first and second season in terms of the TV version. Now, whether or not she has watched the movie version, because I did bring it up once, I don't know if I'll get the chance to ask her. It would be nice, but I know she was a part of it. Also, a quick shout out to the voice actor who does the device. Give me 1 second as I try to bring it up. I just had it. Does it show it? Oh yeah, Donna Burke. Quick shout out to her because she did it both for the TV show version as well as the movie version. Quick shout out to that lady. But overall, this has been Skyhound, also known as Geek Archivist Xavier Pierce, just giving my general analysis, thoughts, and summary of the starting point of the Nanoha franchise. Stay safe, stay sane, and as my good friend Orange Hat Reviews would always say, stay humble. Peace.